Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the sixth community of practice of peace mediation. Welcome to Brussels. Such a pleasure to have you here this morning in the room. We see a really full room. That's excellent. Big welcome also to all the participants online. The sixth EU community of practice of peace mediation has a long title. I'm going to read it. It's called Tailoring Dialogue and Mediation Processes to Conflict Dynamics, the Power of Partnerships. And that's really a bit what we want to look at as well in the coming 2 days, how we can work better together in supporting mediation and dialogue. But before going a bit more into these themes, I would really like to introduce to you our distinguished keynote speaker of this morning, His Excellency, Mr. Francisco Fontan, who is the head of cabinet of the High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Vice President of the Commission, Josep Borrell. Francisco Fontan is a career EU diplomat with a long and rich career in foreign affairs, more than 20 years, lots of field experience, and particularly also in a mediation process in Banda Aceh, where the EU played an important role at the time. Francisco, without further ado, over to you. Such a pleasure to have you here this morning.
Thank you very much. Good morning to all of you. I hope you can hear me. I have here a 6 pages speech. I am very undisciplined person, so I'll have a lot of problems to follow it. But I'll do my best. Just to start, thanking Guillaume and all his team for organizing this, for all the work, and for counting on me. Guillaume told me when we had lunch not long ago, would you? And being who you are, I said yes immediately without thinking. And then when I was going through the speech that your team put together for me, and I thank you for that as well, I realized, boy, I have been doing these things. I mean, I've been part of this world you come from. Most of you probably are professionals on the subject. For me, it was just something that happened throughout at some point in my career, and then it went away. But I had the opportunity to be a little bit of in your shoes and having these very strong feelings that you can actually make a difference somewhere where it's really needed. And usually it's a place that is very complicated, and that the atrocities you are confronted to, the entangled issues that you have to deal with, the years-long, decades-long kind of context you are familiar with, and at the same time keep that stamina and that hope that things can get better. So, without being a professional like all of you, I have had my good years exposure to what you do. So you have all my respect. I'm extremely happy to see you here this morning. I'm going to try to now focus a little bit on the speech, otherwise I can talk forever. Ladies and gentlemen, dear peace mediation practitioners, I am pleased to see so many of you here today, both in the room and online, for the 6th European Union Community of Practice on Peace Mediation. In the next 2 days, we will gather in this EU community of peace mediation you all belong to. We will hear your thoughts and where we stand in a time of profound geopolitical shifts. The objective being, of course, to learn from each other and build partnerships. We all agree that we are in a very, very peculiar context in the world right now, and that it puts a lot of challenges on the work you do on a daily basis. Opportunities, but a lot of challenges, because the wins are wins of the different kind. I have in my career seen several conflict situations followed by hope, and of hope followed by conflict. Had the chance to work in then ex-Yugoslavia, in Burundi, in Guinea-Bissau, all that in the 90s, and I had the chance to work in Kabul and Hanoi later on. And as was mentioned before, I had the chance to head the European House in Banda Aceh in 2005 and 2007 after the tsunami. This was, and allow me to start with this personal experience. This, in my opinion, was probably the most successful peace initiative ever supported by European peace mediators, in partnership with ASEAN partners, the UN system, the World Bank, the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Korea, and so many others I apologize for not mentioning here today. And I had the chance to visit Aceh 6 years ago with my family, and I experienced a profound sense of relief. We got that one right, which I guess that's something you have gone through yourself, and if you haven't yet, I hope you will eventually in your endeavors. The mediation, the disarmament observers, the drafting of a new autonomy law, the elections monitoring, the recognition of the specificities cultural institutionally of Aceh, all that without breaking away from the rest of Sumatra, from the rest of Indonesia. I think it was quite a success. So yes, it sometimes works. And one could argue 9 billion euros at the time was a serious investment for a relatively very small population. All that political capital that we all invested in it, all that time and attention in a faraway place. But conflicts, the way I see it, they're like a fire in the woods. You can never be sure how it is spread, when it stops, what can bring it back. You may say Aceh is small, but Indonesia is big, and the Malacca Strait is geopolitically, geoeconomically key. So, in a nutshell, if you don't tackle conflict head on, you don't know how far can it spread, and suddenly it's not small anymore. You understand, Kamala. But let me elaborate on 3 points that I think define the current situation, the global current situation. We are increasingly talking about defense and deterrence, and unfortunately for a good reason, I think. To ensure conflict does not spread in the face of aggressive big neighbors. But we cannot just aspire to freeze the conflict, we need to deactivate them. That's your specialty. We need to tackle conflict. They will not go away otherwise. They will heat up at some point, as we can see, close and far from this sunny morning in Brussels. Geopolitical rivalries and a resurgence of conflicts between the states is back. I'm sure you have noticed, and could easily multiply if there is a perception that it's right to bomb your neighbor, or that international humanitarian law, well, it doesn't carry consequences if you don't respect it anymore, or that impunity for the powerful is guaranteed, it's safe. Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine is an example of all that here in Europe. But so is too the spiraling situation in the Middle East, the ever greater power rivalry in the Indo-Pacific, the bursting of simmering of intrastate conflicts in Africa. These are examples of a return of violent tensions between nation states on top of internal conflict. Nothing you don't know. Many are taking the multilateral rules-based order for granted. Others are exploiting it to create an alternative, neo-realist world order grounded in interest-driven alliance and zero-sum approaches. Gloves are off or on the way to be taken off. And we all know that everything is affected and accelerated by powerful conflict drivers of our times, like climate change and the use of social media and AI, as well as the weaponization of almost everything. I don't know why I write here almost, from trade wars and economic warfare to alternative narratives, or the weaponization of migration itself. of human suffering. In sum, the conflict landscape today is more fragmented, is less predictable, is more interconnected at the same time. So how to build peace in this emerging and frankly worrisome world? How to address this profoundly changing conflict landscape? Last month, the Pact for the Future was adopted by the UN in New York, as I hope you all know. It clearly outlined the importance of preventive diplomacy, mediation, and peace building, and the need to adapt them to address the new and emerging threats to international peace and security. Russians and others try hard to sabotage it, I can tell you this. But many Africans and others did not allow that to happen, as multilateralism is one of the antidotes against conflict, and many, many countries know. At times when many, also here in the EU, focus in our security and defense posture, we cannot afford simply neglecting conflicts that do not seem to affect us directly. Conflicts have a way to reach us all, eventually, all of us. We need to renew and update our peace policies and tool sets constantly, learning from each other. Here in the EU, we love saying we were created as a peace project after 2 world wars, because it's true. Peace, mediation, and dialogue are key pillars of our founding treaty and of today's EU foreign and security policy. But again, building peace abroad is also an important part of preserving peace at home. It is in the EU's, in all of our self-interest, to continue mediation, to continue our efforts to promote peaceful arrangement between conflicting parties. Thinking only about your direct security is not thinking seriously about your long-term security. We need to partner with our friends to promote peace, but at the end of the day, we make peace with our enemies. I'm sure you have heard this before. It's more important than ever to repeat this, tough as it is. But not just in any terms. It must be in UN Charter terms, and that is the ultimate goal. Here in Brussels, EU's commitment to peace mediation is reflected at all levels of EU diplomacy, starting with my boss, the HRVP. He's our top mediator, but if I may say this, don't tell anybody. Lately, it feels more and more like a crisis management, avoiding the flames from spreading that actually concentrated on achieving peace. You have to be conscious of the geopolitical consequences of conflict, but also of the levels of human suffering that it unleashes. That should be a very important guiding force for all of us, not to give up when it seems that there is no hope. Giving up is not an option for those who are caught in the conflict. Together with the HRVP, a constellation of specialized EU diplomats follow. Many of them are here today, US Special Representative and envoys, heads of delegation, experts, all of them accompanied by the EU Mediation Support Team at the EAS. Together they identify, formulate, and accompany EU mediation. I'm sure you know them. But now let me turn to my second point. We must build peace at the macro level when history gives us the chance, but also by advancing in small steps. A temporary ceasefire agreement, a deal to secure humanitarian access, an economic arrangement that over time can build confidence between conflict parties. These processes will not always be linear, not always be clean. They are not going to sometimes make a big headlines or attract the most ambitious among us, but together and over time, these small breakthroughs matter a lot. We have here the Director for Peace, Security and Defense and Partnerships. Thank you very much for joining us, Cosmin. And he will give you concrete examples of the EU's peace mediation efforts as part of our wider approach to conflict resolution. But I'm almost done. But let me say that beyond visible and high-level mediation engagements, the EU is providing discrete mediation support in some 30 conflicts worldwide. Not all of them can be mentioned openly, but I'm sure many will come up in your conversations in the next 2 days. Let me therefore underline that the EU is relentlessly continuing and even expanding its efforts for peace way beyond the EU's neighborhood. To maintain a wide presence, you need stamina, perseverance, and determination, but we also need partnerships, which bring me to my third and last point, the fundamental importance of partnerships in building peace. I believe this is also why many of you are here today, ready to share your experiences and engage with partners. Your commitment to finding peaceful solutions to conflict is needed more than ever in today's world. Building lasting peace is a process, often with failures, but when we do succeed, big or small, the impact for the affected populations is massive and worth every effort. And together, we increase our chances. To be clear, we need more cooperation in mediation. We need to move away from competition among us. The Pact for the Future underlines this clearly. For the EU, this means partnering more with the UN, of course, but also with other mediator actors such as you. Many of you hope they would agree with this. We need to talk and share more, think of ways of expanding mediation networks. We have all comparative advantages and specific knowledge that, if put together, would allow us to achieve more. I certainly witnessed that in Banda Aceh 20 years ago, as I was saying before, where you really had, you really benefit from the expertise of the country, of the region, of multilateral institutions, of experts such as you, of military, of politicians, on constitutional experts. It was by bringing all those different expertise from those different countries and background that I think we managed to make a difference. And to continue with a positive note, it's almost over. I would like to warmly appreciate that so many of you are present here today, many of you coming from far away. I should have started with these, apologies. It shows that mediation remains high on the agenda of all of us, in spite of the numerous challenges these days. The EU has its most valuable resources in its member states. I truly think so. So I am particularly pleased that Finland and Spain, as co-chairs, yesterday relaunched the EU groups for Friends of Peace Mediation here in Brussels. Many representatives from EU member states' capitals attended and are here in the room with us today as well. And I thank you for that. I wish you all fruitful, inspiring, and innovative exchanges over the course of the next 2 days, and many new partnerships among mediators and peace builders. If after these 2 days of discussions, we end up building interdisciplinary, groups of with an international dimension and different perspectives to focus on concrete conflicts or concrete issues, I think this would have been a real success. Thank you for your patience, thank you for your time, and enjoy Brussels.
Thank you, Pepe. Thanks a lot. Now I'd like to ask the panelists to join us on the stage for the opening panel. Thank you. And we will try to make this opening panel more of a discussion. We'll start with some opening statements, and I'll introduce the panelists in a minute, and then have a bit of a more discussion format. Let me briefly introduce myself. My name is Martin Albani. I'm the head of the mediation support team here in the European External Action Service. And I'm moderating this morning and the conference together with Sonia.
Oh, that's me. Hi, my name is Sonia Reinas Chivenidas. It's really a pleasure to see so many of you in the room.
Thank you.
I'm the executive director of the European Peacebuilding Liaison Office, which is Europe's largest peace group of individuals, organizations, platforms, and networks. And so many of our 55 members are here today, so thank you very much. And our job is about making the European Union a more effective global peace actor. And I think we'll see how that's being done in the next couple of days.
Absolutely. Let's have a look at it this morning already. And it's really my pleasure to introduce to you panelists, starting with my boss, Mr. Cosmin Dovran, the Director for Peace Partnerships and Crisis Management in the European External Action Service. Cosmin has a really long career in diplomacy, a former Romanian diplomat, and now for many years in the European system, long experience on EU foreign and security policy, but also the wider EU external relations. And now in his current job, he oversees very much the EU's mediation support work. I also have to mention that Cosmin has a very important meeting in the council. He has to leave us a little bit earlier, but I'm very happy you're here this morning. Thank you.
Morning.
Great. And to Cosmin's left, we have Hannah Tete, who was the former UN Special Envoy for the Horn of Africa. Hannah has an incredible biography. I encourage you to look at it. And I'm not going to go into all of the details today, but it's a real pleasure to have you with us. And you have so much to bring on the side of partnerships, coming at this from a number of different angles. So we're delighted that you're here with us.
Thank you very much.
And then Hannah, to your left, we have Peter Wagner. A pleasure to see you again, Head of Service for Foreign Policy Instruments at the European Commission. I'd say Peter is a champion for the need to solve problems in different ways. You're acutely aware of the myriad of different crises and problems globally. You've spent a lot of time traveling and seeing the work of the European Union. And Peter's looking for stories. And I know so many of you in this room are doing incredible work. And so don't hesitate to let him know some of the things that are really working and what makes a difference. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
And I would really like to introduce, and it's a particular pleasure to welcome Kama Ekmekci, who joins us from Beirut, we're really happy you managed to come here yesterday. Kama is an associate fellow for international affairs at the American University of Beirut and also advises on mediation and security sector reform. Before that, she was for 11 years an international affairs advisor to the former Prime Minister of Lebanon, Saad Hariri, and worked for the United Nations as well. And Kama has a particular interest also in empowering women in the field of diplomacy. Kama, you founded the Diplo Women Initiative, and you're also a member of the Mediterranean Women Mediators Network. Pleasure to have you here
Thank you for having
this
me.
morning. Yes, with that, now you know the panelists. I think we'll start right away. And Cosmin, you have the word first.
All right. First of all, thank you, Martin. Thank you, Sonia, for moderating this event. Let me start by thanking all of you for coming to Brussels. This is my third experience with the Community of Practice for Peace Mediation, and I see that it's becoming more and more popular. So I think this is quite an achievement. So thank you very much for being there. I actually had rather a long speech, but since Martin already mentioned that I will have to leave, perhaps I would focus on two important elements that I think are important to advance a little bit the what we do on peace mediation. And for me, I think changing the reality on the ground is the most important thing. And then I used to believe that investing in large projects, big initiatives would actually bring a lot of change. But then lately, I realized that actually smaller projects working at grassroots level and with communities perhaps is for the medium term and for the long term is a much more winning strategy for actually changing the realities on the ground. So I would like to give you a few examples of the work that the European Union is doing with the hope that I will do justice to everything that we do. And I'll start with Yemen, and we, on purpose, I chose a few examples which are not probably the most politically discussed situations, but for me I think it's important not to forget countries and geographies that are really important and where there is a need for support for mediation, and there is a real need to bring more peace in that region. In Yemen, we continue to support the Office of the Special Envoy and co-chairing the working group on cessation of hostilities, also with EU member states, the US, and other partners. So this is an example where basically we work very closely with the UN. We are also facilitating coordination and exchange exchange between track 2 mediation actors and establish direct technical assistance to the government, particularly in the economic realm. And I bring Yemen because, in fact, after what happened in the Red Sea, and this is also still a very difficult situation, I think we should not forget that we do have to do more to bring more peace in this country. The second example is Sudan. And here the UN contribution to multi-track mediation and support to regional ownership has gradually grown since the outbreak of the war. And in the regard, we coordinate closely with the African Union and other international partners to complement ongoing mediation endeavors. The EU has hosted and supported consultations with civilian stakeholders, meetings of Sudanese women, and recently a Sudan Youth Dialogue to contribute to the envisaged African-owned political process. And we also support local mediation in conflict-affected regions. The third example is Western Balkans. And we are also very active. We continue to be the facilitator of the normalization process between Belgrade, the dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina. Also in Kosovo, we are encouraging to community dialogue as part of the EU's broader commitment to reconciliation and reconstruction in the country. And Western Balkans is a region where I think perhaps we should step up what we do in terms of mediation, but also to bring a little bit all the countries, these countries together. A recent success story, and we are actually very proud of that because it's a former colleague of the mediation team that now basically works on the ground, is about local mediation in Ghana, where the EU supported mediation efforts that successfully eased tensions between the Fulbe and local communities, preventing transhumance-related conflict for the first time in years. This is something which I think, even though it may look a small achievement, I think it's quite important. And I had the occasion to be in Ghana, and it was the first subject that actually was raised by the local interlocutors at a very high level. Obviously, the way they looked at it was not exactly how we saw it. So we think it's a good example to show what perhaps we can do elsewhere as well. Now, Mr. Fontan mentioned the Pact for the Future, which obviously is a key achievement. I think this is quite a good success. And then to quote from the pact, the challenges we face far exceed the capacity of any single state to manage alone. And in our interconnected world, we must operate in a collaborative manner, driven by the values of multilateralism. And I say this because I think this is the second element that perhaps we would focus more resources in the coming years, which is to bring these partnerships and to forge partnerships with different actors, with the UN, with the African Union, with regional organizations like ECOWAS, because we cannot do everything alone. For me, this is quite a key message. We're also establishing bilateral partnerships with countries like Switzerland and Norway, because these countries, they are really interested to basically join forces with the The third element, and perhaps the last that I would like to underline, is that all the work that we do is not to show off, to get short-term glory, but is to try to basically start a transformation process in those countries and in those regions. And on the EU side, because I travel a lot and I hear a lot of critical comments, which I like. I always enjoy critical comments. But sometimes I think that the work that we do at the EU is not very well known. So perhaps we need to look at ways to explain more the very concrete actions that the European Union is doing in partnership with other actors. So I'll stop there in the interest of time, but very happy to exchange with you during this session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Osman.
Thank you, Cosmin. Very concrete. Hannah, we're going to turn over to you. So the audience can follow along. We gave you 3 sort of guiding questions, but perhaps examples that, like those that you've heard from Cosmin, but from your angle. Mediation and partnerships, maybe some opportunities to use mediation even more. and obviously the challenging global order and the impact that it's having on this kind of work. So now we're all on the same page, and it's over to you, please.
Well, thank you very much. Good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for inviting me. Let me start with the disclaimer: I do not speak on behalf of the UN. As the former UN Special Envoy for the Horn of Africa, this cannot be interpreted as a UN position on the issues that I'm about to raise, and I just wanted to clarify that right from the onset. But having had the immediate past experience of working in the role of UN Special Envoy, and also having dealt with many of the peace and security challenges that my continent faces in my different roles, I think I would like us to start from the beginning, the foundational issue of the need to re-establish trust. Because one of the problems that we have with the ongoing conflict dynamics as we see them playing out, and I'm referring specifically to the African context, and indeed in the Pact for the Future it was referenced, that the continuous, as it were, abuse or even ignoring the principles of the UN Charter, the violations of the Charter, the violations of the international rules-based system, creates a situation where for continents like mine, where our institutions are still very much in the process of growing and strengthening. I'm talking about the African Union, I'm talking about the regional economic communities like ECOWAS, as you mentioned, that have modeled themselves on the international multilateral system, where they see that this system, as well designed and well crafted as it is, appears to be falling apart at the seams. And even though we talk about normative frameworks, we talk about the rules-based order, the powerful have the opportunity to ignore them and to, as it were, simply behave as if sometimes these frameworks don't exist. Then the question that they ask is, why is it that Africa is being held to this standard, a standard that you yourselves do not maintain? And until we understand that what we are doing in the current conflict dynamics across the world is undermining the basis of the whole system, and therefore we are committed to try to see what we can do to strengthen it and to make sure that it is not a system that can be used at the convenience to hit someone on the head or to hit a country on the head or to say you are in violation. But at the same time, in other contexts, it doesn't really seem to matter. Then what happens is that the basis for our cooperation and collaboration in and of itself will be called into question. But having said that, I think it's important, and it is something that I have referenced in the course of my work, that these partnerships are incredibly important. Indeed, as you mentioned, the EU has supported the African Union in allowing for the civilian dialogue to take place between Sudanese civilian actors. Now, given that Sudanese civilians were not part of the Jeddah process or any of the follow-on discussions immediately from the Jeddah process, even though the ALPS process is somewhat different, without that opportunity for Sudanese civilians to also have the chance to opine about what their future should look like, I think that we would have been missing the most important voices of the people who these governments are supposed to serve. And so recognizing that these relationships are very important, recognizing that we need to be able to strengthen those partnerships in order to make any meaningful impact on the conflict context that we have in the world today, I think that one of the opportunities of this discussion is to dispassionately ask ourselves the question, how do we address what is going wrong? And how do we do what we can to make sure that we reset for these partnerships to be useful, valuable, and achieve their intended outcomes? I was previously involved many years ago in the Revitalize RCIS process in South Sudan. Again, without the support of the European Union and some EU member states, I don't think we would have had that agreement, which, as shaky as it is, because sometimes these processes work, sometimes they don't exactly work as intended, as shaky as it is, has held the peace in South Sudan for the last 8 years. and we have not had a situation where there has been a resumption of conflict. And so the point I would like to make is, what do I think we can do differently? The UN and the African Union have a joint framework on peace and security, which describes in some detail how there will be jointness in the approach to addressing some of these conflict contexts. And it's available online. You just need to Google it, you'll find it. But it emphasizes the importance of joint analysis. It emphasizes the importance of preparation together in order to be able to come to a common understanding of not just what the situation is, but how you intend to deal with it. I think that even though I'm not aware that the EU has such a joint framework, and maybe there's not necessarily the need for a formal joint framework, I think that the way in which the joint framework on peace and security defines how this kind of engagement can take place should be a model not just for UN-AU partnership, but for the African Union and other organizations, and for the regional economic communities and other organizations as well. And then I think it's also important to emphasize that while these civilian dialogues are important, and I just acknowledge the contribution of the EU in this regard, they tend to be seen as track 2 processes. Now, how do we bring the track 2 and the track 1 together in such a way that they are mutually reinforcing? Otherwise, it's like you have people discussing in different rooms, and yet these discussions never really reflect in terms of the more significant political agreements that are supposed to bring an end to the conflicts that we have in the first place. And I think that for us to look to see how these various different tracks become mutually reinforcing should be a factor of the way in which we engage in mediation practice going forward. And I think I'll end there.
Wow. Incredibly helpful. Thank you for those reflections. Peter, I'd like to turn to you.
Thank you very much. I hope that I didn't mess up with the micro in between. Thank you very much to all of you for coming. And it's more than the usual gratitude that we have for you being here, because we have more people here than normally. And I think being able to widen the base of the people, the number of people from different backgrounds whom we're having here from different regions, is really one of the main success factors for me here in this event today, and I'm very grateful for that. I'm also grateful to Pepe Fontana, who set very nicely the scene and spares me from explaining again how risky and dangerous the world is. I think he set out very nicely the wider political context in which us together, are working. I'm also very happy to see between all the men running this exercise today, someone like Antje Herberg, who is one of the founding mothers of the exercise. To those who have been around for a while, definitely a familiar name and part of, I would say, the European footprint in mediation, which in all the international aspects is also important for us. Now, Pepe clearly referred to this situation in which we are, also, let's say, institutional at the moment. What is it that we bring to the attention of our political leaders now that we are all still very busy with the current bosses who are still traveling a lot and launching lots of new things? Secondly, heavily preparing the incoming team. And thirdly, ourselves, at least at the head of service level, having to deal with a lot of the trips which they do no longer want to do and which we have to cover, the more unpleasant ones usually. So in this situation, however, and that is on the contents, the more interesting part is how do we balance in the current situation the EU in these discussions between security and peace. And some of you from the community, we had, and very grateful, Sonia, for you having taken a bit the lead on that. We had over the last year discussed a little bit, what can we do jointly to make sure that in this situation, a lot of talk about security, maybe not that much at the moment about peace, that the peace agenda is also be brought to the attention of the leadership. And to some degree, yesterday with some of you, we already touched upon it. I think we are quite successful in the sense of there's much less talk about security in what is the Bible of us as civil servants here in Brussels. Those are the so-called mission letters of the commissioners, the high representative vice presidents. Because that is where really I think the balance in the mandate given is much better than I think some of us would have thought a while ago in this situation where there's more and more requests for the so-called hard elements in the security. For us, and reference was made to that also by Pepe, we have more conflicts. We have, as everybody else, less budget. We are at the EU level so far quite lucky in that we are, because of our budget structure, at least for the next 2 years still, largely, I do not call 7% cuts significant cuts, so we are largely able to keep the budgets compared with a lot of international partners with whom we are talking. I was last week in Geneva and Lausanne meeting many people from the community and from EU member states. Many of them have 25, 30% budget cuts in this area. Others do not even know at all what they can expect next year to be able to spend on this kind of work. So therefore, we are still in a privileged situation. We are spending around 90 million euro since 2021 in around 40 countries. Examples are coming up. Why I'm asking this? Because it is very clear in our new forthcoming political cycle, the next big step are budget discussions. They will happen still at the end of this year, early next year, and then our structure for the next 7 years after 2027 will be set out. And that is, of course, the moment where we jointly have to make the case, why is this bottom-up work, why are these things important? And therefore, forgive me, this is a bit less of the political vision that I can offer to you, but it's the bread and butter work of those who have to make an effort to see that we can keep our current level of ambition, because I think that should be our objective. Ideally, we should be able to do even more. As EU, and there I spare you the details, many of you are representing it, we have a broad range of tools from EUSRs to Hermes, to CFSP missions, the work, of course, of the whole External Action Service. Many other colleagues in EU delegations, embassies are important there. But for us, as I said, at this more also technical level, at this need to defend the basis that is allowing us to continue the work, I think there are 4 main points that I would briefly like to refer to, and they address a little bit the guiding questions that you have put to me. One of them is around, of course, the question, what do we have to do, what should we do? And I started with that already. I think we have to be as diverse and broad in our approach as possible. That is geographically, that is age, that is whatever. Diversity is really a big, big value. And at the same time, we also have to really be also in all that we do inclusive. We have to be able to bring into our processes as many as possible. So even if we say we focus now on women or on youth in a certain sector, it is very clear that the overall objective is society at large in a certain context. And all the values elements that you are mentioned there are important for us. It is, however, for us indeed a starting point that we try to work more and more, now also in the Middle East peace process, trying to help colleagues to set up processes which bring women more into the game, which maybe allow youth to play a bigger, more active role and not only on the consumption side. A second point that is quite important for us also in this, as I said, in this fight to justify and explain what we're doing and why this expenditure is necessary, it's the ownership. I think it is very important that not only this ownership is felt, and you also refer to that in some contexts, by the people, but that it is also shown to the outside. And that means that we have to demonstrate that those running the processes, or they have to demonstrate that they're really not running that because we or any of the other implementers give some grants or fund certain structures, whatever. I think it is important that over time, the genuine ownership is coming to the forefront. For us, it's very important. Our embassies, the FPI regional teams, part of that, are working on it, and I think that's a key element of success. Third element is being able to adapt to the constantly changing situations. Because we will have to increasingly not have the luxury that if there is a new situation, we can invent something new. We increasingly will have to see what is already there, what can we redirect, what can we learn from, where can we do things more efficiently. So it will, the times that we can just pile up activities, new ones on top are over, and you've heard it last year, the sentence, I think we all have to learn everywhere. To end riding certain dead horses and see which are the new dynamics on which we have to invest, in which we have to go. And finally, and that was also my first point on this wide point, it's really the point of working together. We're very diverse. We are grey Brussels bureaucrats. Some of you represent very rich local tissue. You represent national diplomats here. We have a wide range of actors. Very briefly, something that I think we are increasingly also looking at, also the different institutions, countries, member states that are supporting the processes. We among ourselves also have to improve our information exchange, the understanding for our respective work and objectives. And I think if we work on those 4 points, and then finally, and reference was made to it, are able to explain the stories. Because if I see the new HRVP and we talk about where is it that the big blocks of our budget are going, it is quite easy to demonstrate demined territory. It's quite easy to demonstrate number of trained police people, whatever you have in the indicators. Showing, maybe less quantitative, but the qualitative stories of where is it that the very, very different types of mediation work is making a difference, has made a difference, and is keeping the world a better place, is very important for us, and that's why we are really looking forward to hearing from you in the coming 2 days about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Now over to you. Come.
I have a lot of stories for you, Peter. That's where the money is. Good morning. It is an honor and a duty for me to be here with you today. When Martin asked me to join this distinguished panel a few weeks ago, I told him, Martin, I will do my best to come to Brussels if I can fly out of Beirut. Thankfully, despite the extremely volatile situation in Lebanon, and particularly in Beirut and around the airport, I was able to safely make it to Brussels yesterday. I didn't have to go through the risk of being here. There will be many events and many such opportunities in the future. But I wanted to be here, particularly at this very difficult time for my region. Because our jobs as mediators was never an easy one. It was never a safe one. And because I still have faith in the collective and individual power of this room. I still have faith in the collective and individual goodwill of the people in this room. My kids asked me what was so important that I needed to travel with the potential risk, as you all know, of not being able to return home. I told them I'm going to meet all the wonderful people who are working to stop wars around the world. They almost pushed me out the door. Faith in mediation, dear colleagues, remains the only lifeline for millions of people. And we need to take that responsibility and duty very seriously. The last few years have been a lose-lose situation. the nature of conflicts has changed, and the anatomy of wars has evolved. There has been a decline in global cooperation and a severe downturn in security. Nationalism is on the rise. In fact, we live in a contradictory world where radicalization has become part of some democracies. We are observing sustained violence in post-conflict states and a drastic rise in non-state violent groups. Conflict is no more something of low-income states. It is increasing in middle-income states where there are democratic practices. Fear of the other, dehumanization, and anger have become currencies in which to trade in these situations. We are witnessing the lowest levels of trust. Marie-Joëlle, we need you here with all the trust work. And too many conversations that start with, I will talk to you only if you agree with what I believe in. They don't teach you how to deal with all these moving parts in mediation workshops and trainings. I think there's a general sense amongst us all that we are stuck. But instead of saying we are stuck, I would like us to think that we are at an inflection point in the field of mediation. While the new world order struggles to define itself and take shape in light of regional and global power shifts, and new security architectures are still in the works, we in the mediation community are struggling to adapt to these new realities, where mediation efforts may be constrained or shaped by geopolitical agendas. And a polarized world, and in this polarized world, I'm sure many of us are struggling to maintain impartiality or are viewed by suspicion by conflict parties. I'm sure there will be time over the course of the next 2 days to discuss these many realities. However, one reality I would like to underscore is this trend of what I like to call compartmentalized mediation. This, I believe, may be useful in the short term, but is proving dangerous on the long term. One example is how the different protracted conflicts in my region imposed on mediators, on mediation practitioners, even high-level powered states, to have to narrow intentionally their focus on mediating the immediate needs, and this was discussed in the opening speech. Humanitarian corridors, humanitarian pauses, etc., leaving the bigger issues for later. Although these are very important issues, there is reason to question whether this compartmentalized mediation or band-aid diplomacy is giving way to protracted violence and allowing conflict parties not to have to commit to larger agreements or permanent ceasefires or more sustainable agreements. From 54 active conflicts, there are 20 countries on the emergency watch list for 2024. And these 20 countries constitute 86% of global humanitarian need. This is costing everyone a lot of money. Unfortunately, many people I have spoken to told me that the lack of communication between the mediators and the humanitarians on the ground is becoming dangerous. I think there's room to think together on how we can bridge this gap between humanitarians and mediators. I believe some work perhaps is being done, but this needs to feed into the track 1 and 1.5 discussions. Another reality is the increasing need of back-channel diplomacy. This is more needed than ever today, and different actors can engage in this. When official talks are constrained by public posturing, mediators can use back channels to negotiate informally with different powers, giving them a way to adjust their position without losing face. But one thing remains constant in our business. If one cannot speak to all sides of a certain conflict, one ceases to become a mediator. And keeping those channels open with everyone, however the means are, I think, is worth it. And to be able to talk to all parties these days, we need all hands on deck. And this is where partnerships, multi-layered mediation, inclusivity, pluralism and mediation, choose any culturally sensitive term you like from the drop-down menu, comes in. To bring sustainable peace, I think, at least I hope, that mediators large and small have learned the lesson that sustainable peace and agreements are not possible without engaging in politics with a small p, without engaging with the people. At a time when conflict parties are attacking one another, inclusivity and multi-layered diplomacy is an important weapon to use to remind conflict parties that what they should be attacking jointly is the problem and not each other. And the more this message is hammered from multiple different directions, the higher the chances to create impact. I lead the Women, Peace and Security Regional Hub at the Issam Faris Institute for Public Policy and International Affairs in Beirut. And we are currently leading the Women, Peace and Security Working Group for Arab States with a number of partners, such as UN Women, GIZ, the Swedish Dialogue Institute, the Swiss FDFA, the Middle East Council for Global Affairs in Doha, and many others. The aim is to create a regional mechanism to influence and inform the women, peace, and security policy spaces in preparation for the 25th anniversary next year. To achieve this, a series of consultations with diverse groups of women, peace, and security stakeholders have started with the aim of analyzing existing gaps in the agenda, different frameworks, potential challenges. And the main outcome of the working group is to develop concrete recommendations to inform the high-level debates. While discussing with our partners, one issue that has strongly come out is the lack of will to go the extra mile. Let me explain. In the case of women's inclusion, there is over-focalization on the same tools. For example, gender focal points in mediation teams, or women advisory boards and councils, or a fixation on inclusion at times when we know most processes are in fact frozen. Although these are important, and we have worked long and hard to make these tools available, they have shown in some cases that there are systemic shortcomings to these tools, and it seems we are now in some sort of comfort zone, and we don't want to rock the boats any further. Also, donors are sometimes obsessed with very specific ideas and are uncomfortable with trying new things that their partners on the ground ask them to try. We should not confound to specific existing tools that have been put in place without keeping an open mind about them. And I'm happy to discuss these further over the course of the next few days, should there be any interest in being involved in this WPS working group. I will stop here, Marcus, so I don't pass my 10-minute mark.
Thank you so much.
We've covered a huge amount of ground. We have about 15 minutes, and so Martin and I have a couple of additional questions. And this is always the opportunity to answer the question that you wish that we had asked. But in terms of, I'll just throw a few things out there, right? So violent conflict is absolutely is not inevitable, while conflict is. And so it was very interesting, Cosmin, to hear what is motivating you at the moment in terms of looking at the changing reality on the ground is the most important thing, and particularly smaller cases. And what we're seeing in policy circles is an overwhelming pressure for bigger and better and grander projects. And at the same time, it seems like we've got a crisis of empathy. And why isn't it enough to impact other people's lives? But you get to be in a whole variety of different places, and it would be very interesting about how we continue to make the case in that result. And I'll just add a few more, and then we can kind of go down over to Martin as well, who has some questions. But I'd be really interested in this juncture from track 2 to track 1. Are there some more specific ways, because this is really about partnership, because that's delineated who does what. And there's been a proliferation of track 2 efforts, which is incredibly important. but how can we align those better? Are there some specific ways and avenues? In terms of partners and needing to reestablish trust, how can we listen better? Mediation is about effective listening. This is before you get to the mediation table. As we have a whole bunch of narratives out about new partners or different partners, how can we ensure that we're really listening and also creating room to hear civil society? We have a lot of different tools and early warning systems, the advancement of conflict analysis, but how can we do that? And then lastly, in terms of the evolution of mediation, if this room is as full as it is, it's because we've seen the professionalization of the field of mediation over time, and we have a new trajectory to look at. How can we apply mediation tools in some of the more difficult contexts? Maritime security, maritime peace. How can we use mediation more effectively in different places so it doesn't become a side add-on? I've completely abused my realm of questions. Martin will have more. Our dear panelists may ask and answer which you like, but over to you, Martin.
Thanks, Sonia. Let me add 2 points, because we've heard so much here how the world is changing, geopolitical changes. You've mentioned Cosman, and Peter, you've said, but we need success stories, and my question is, how do we define success, in this moment? And you've mentioned, Karma, you've said there's maybe a band-aid diplomacy now. Maybe we look for quick fixes to some compartmentalized issues, humanitarian corridors, quick ceasefires. And all that is very necessary, but how do we reconcile this with the longer term aim that should still be our aim, to have a fully fledged sustainable peace agreement that can hold 5 years or longer, or forever, ideally, Ideally. So that's the first question, how to reconcile fixation on short-term needs with the overarching aim of longer-term success. And then what I really liked, what I heard a lot here, is that we need more trust, but we also need a certain risk-taking. We need to talk to different actors. We need to talk to all actors in a conflict, ideally. And here the question of partnership comes in, because maybe not everybody is best placed to talk to everybody. How can we work better in partnership to really reaching all partners in such a mediation? And I think we'll open it now for everybody who wants to come in and pick whatever of these 5 questions Sonia and me have asked.
Should I go?
Cosmin, maybe because you have to leave.
I'll go first, and I apologize to all of you
Because
I have to be in the council in 10 minutes. Okay, it may appear that actually what I have said about the small progress that is important to see on the ground is a bit in contradiction with the need to see more than the band-aid diplomacy, which I liked a lot. But it's not. Because what's happening now is that the public narratives and the news are actually filled with very operational developments. But these operational developments are not necessarily about the peace, are about the what this actor did, what this army or part of the army did, what was the achievement in getting more ground, who was caught and who is still to be caught. And I think that that's where the problem is, because there's not much discussion about all the actions that a lot of us are doing to bring peace and to bring a little bit more calm in different countries. So for me, it's important to get this story out, because if we don't get this story out, then basically there's no chance to link track 1 and track 2, because then everybody follows the same logic, and we see it in the Middle East, and our special representative will bring more details on that. The lack of trust is also linked with the lack of political will actually to do something about it, and we have to say it. I see this Of course, it's not easy because you have different positioning. You have multiple actors that don't necessarily act in support of peace, but they see an opportunity in a crisis to achieve whatever political, economic gains they have. So that's what makes it more difficult. But for me, bringing these small successes into the public narrative is something that I really think is important. And thank you all of you for being here. And I'll have to excuse that I have to go. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rasmus.
Jourdan?
Kama, I see you want to.
Yes, I want to tackle the issue of the future of mediation because it is one that keeps me quite busy. A few days ago, I bumped into a friend of mine who's a lawyer, and she asked me if I could sit with her daughter and guide her a little bit. She's graduating this year and wants to apply to university and what she wants to do. And through the Diploma Initiative, which I started back in 2017, I work a lot with young women and girls to encourage them to get into politics and into diplomacy and into mediation. So naturally, I asked her, jokingly, I would love to sit with your daughter, but don't you want her to become a lawyer like you? She told me, Karma, a recent Baker and McKinsey report predicted that by 2036, lawyers may become obsolete. Thankfully, mediation, diplomacy, and negotiations are in their core inherently human endeavors and requires the right dose of intelligence, empathy, and emotional awareness. And at the end of the day, I think nothing will replace that handshake that brings about an agreement or peace. However, AI is actually very much present in our world. It has already embarked on many journeys. And just as AI is acting as a multiplier for existing threat vectors and influencing warfare, whether in cyber warfare or through lethal autonomous weapons, or we are seeing that right now, to name a few, AI can also be a multiplier for peace building. Thanks to its power in enhancing threat mitigation or AI's power in predictive analysis to develop cooperative AI models to help in mediation, and perhaps, once and for all, reduce both the redundancy and competitiveness of mediation actors and develop efficient models for cooperation, avoiding the duplication and sometimes the triplication of resources. So maybe AI is our answer for all the competition in our space.
Okay, that was a very clear answer. We just need AI and then it's all solved.
Partially.
Hannah, how do you see that?
Well, so let me start on the issue of trust. And trust is not just between institutions, between our member states, but also the key stakeholders within any conflict situation, which is the most difficult thing to build, because without that, you're not going to have a peace agreement, right? And I think that what is important is that as we engage as institutional representatives, as mediators, it is important to be actively seen as being even-handed, ab initio. Because there are a number of processes that I have been engaged in previously, and when it was perceived that the institutions, I'm not saying that was the case, I'm saying that by, for instance, national actors, it was perceived that multilateral organizations were taking the side of one of the conflict parties, it becomes almost impossible to then build on that and to build any kind of willingness to allow for our engagement in the peace process going forward. So when you ask the question, what can we do differently? I think it's important to look at our working methods and to make sure that as much as possible, we're trying, everybody has their blind spots, right? Everybody has your, as it were, biases that you might not necessarily recognize. I don't know whether AI is going to help us to be able to remove those, but as much as possible, we have to come to the beginning of a process, not taking a position, even if we don't actually state it, because then it influences the way in which we act going forward. That's one. Two, I like the point you made about let's, abandon dead horses. There might be things that people have worked on, and because they're seen to be moderately effective, we still hang on to them as the success stories. I think we should be ready to jettison processes that are not working, especially when we do a really concrete evaluation And we can see that the impact of this has been minimal. Now, when we deal with mediation, the point that you made, I very much agree with, regarding, let's look at the quick wins. Let's see how we can do humanitarian access. Let's see how we can improve delivery of humanitarian assistance in a particular context. And it works for a week or two and then it stops working. And yet we trumpet these as the successes. They're not successes. For crying out loud, they are excuses that we are presenting to ourselves, right? To justify and to give validity to the work that we're taking, the work that we're doing. So I think we really need to take a harder look at what works, what has not really worked, abandon what has not really worked so that we don't waste resources, limited resources, and focus on the real concrete core issues that are going to move the needle one way or the other. Now, the actual mechanics of working together, the European Union has assisted many of these organizations to develop early warning mechanisms to be able to have more concrete conflict analysis. I would say that we have such a multiplicity of tools right now that if it were just a matter of tools, we should have been able to address a lot of these issues a long time ago. So the question is, are those tools fit for purpose and are they working? And how do we make them work better? Otherwise, why did we waste our money doing these things in the first place? And the last point that I would like to make before, when I get onto a soapbox, I can continue for a very long time. The last point I would like to make before I end my intervention is this. Whatever is happening politically and in terms of conflict has a historical context. We don't want to get into all of that detail because usually it can also be a distracting factor in and of itself. But I think, especially when you're dealing with the hard contexts in the Horn of Africa today, in the Sahel region, in the Middle East, anywhere else where we have these ongoing conflicts, we have to ask ourselves, is it important now to shift away from some of the founding principles on which we based our actions in the first place? And think about what we do differently to really make an impact this time around. Somalia. The European Union has spent a huge amount of money providing troop stipends for AMISOM, for ATMIS. Now there's a discussion about AWESOM. Is more of the same actually going to make any difference? Right? What is it that we're going to do differently in order to shift the needle on that? As I said, I don't want to hog the mic and to take over this discussion, but I really think that the time has come for a reflection on doing things better with less resources to enhance our credibility, to regain public trust. Otherwise, from the outside looking in, this is creating opportunities that don't really, creating opportunities to professionalize an area of public activity that hasn't really delivered the value that we expected that it would.
I think we could listen to you all day, so don't worry about the soapbox thing. But let me turn over to Peter, who would love to probably say a few words on some of this. And then I'm watching the time also. So please, over to you, Peter.
I could listen to Hannah endlessly as long as you confirm and further develop what I also think, and where you definitely touched upon a lot of issues where I could now start going endlessly. I admitted recently that I surrender in trying to understand all the different early warning systems which we are paying for. Not to talk about not knowing how they function. I don't even know the many different organizations to whom we give money to help us on early warning. And then, of course, in the populistic manner, you could afterwards say, and still, since I'm the last 2.5 years on the current job, we've always been surprised by the latest developments. But still, you have this question more generally to me, what is it that makes success? Because I'm asking for success, I'm asking for stories, so what is it? And I admit it's not easy to define. I said it's earlier to say, Somalia, we have delivered X many long-range reconnaissance vehicles, whatever of what type, how many troops we have trained, all these things are easy. What have we achieved on certain projects which we, as FPI, as EU, are also running there, on adaptation to the challenges of the conflicts between the traditional traditional ones between herders and farmers, or the questions now notably of climate change in that particular region and security, much more difficult to measure and report on, but we have to find ways. Now, I have to be consistent with what I say internally, and internally I always tell my colleagues, we are looked at and measured against, are we fast and are we relevant? Fast for some other services might not be an issue, but for us as the people who are supposed to be among the first responders, speed is an issue. And sitting around the open fire for months and ventilate on something where maybe it's better to have something going and trying to do this first part, even if you called it an excuse, it is important as well. Because we cannot wait until we have the perfect master plan for everything. So that's why it is really important. And I admit that when it comes to the speed, many of our procedures, and I remember vaguely that last year I spoke quite a bit about that, don't make it easy. Not for you, not for us. Maybe artificial intelligence will seriously also help us there in managing, streamlining many of our processes, but it remains the endless challenge. How to make sure that money for which at the end of the day, me and the colleagues who sign up for it vis-à-vis also the European taxpayer is properly spent at all those local levels we're talking about, and that we have the kind of accountability in a balanced but in a good way. The second part is then the relevance, which is much more difficult, as I said, to grasp and define. A lot of it is what are the people we work with on the ground at the end of the day saying about it. As you said, are they saying it was a success, or are they saying, listen, you just were another talk shop among others, and we have our doubts. That is important. But on the relevance, and allow me that bracket, longer bracket, it is also, Cosmin started with, and I'm all in favor of, yes, it's the local one, the small ones, and we need this little progress. But vis-à-vis our wider populations, we do not increase our credibility if we do not advance at the same time at the big headline conflicts. And if you called it the handshakes, the signatures, this is not populistic. This is just, you have to have that as a vision as well. Very important, no doubt, to avoid that things grow from local to regional, national, transnational, yes. But at the same time, if we're not able to address some of our large-scale international wars, conflicts, whatever you want to use it, our credibility as such is suffering, and each of us will continue struggling there. So that's what I call, that we have to call the moving from the boutique approach in a niche, which is very important and what we hear a lot about now, to also looking at the wider picture. And now I've forgotten who of you referred to maritime security. We discovered ourselves just one of these days when looking at, for example, what the EU does on maritime security, and also beyond mediation, but including mediation with our instruments, etc., we suddenly have a much bigger and stronger positive story to tell on a number of issues, where many of the smaller regional, etc., initiatives are helping to move towards progress. And for us, then, if we talk at the others, some success factors, just very quickly, before going too far, is really, and you mentioned it, we're traveling, etc. And for me, it's always very important to just watch and try to understand when we are somewhere, is this an inclusive process? Or are we just having some niche people, again, to whom we talk, and the mass of the people stand somewhere at the margins of villages, stay in their houses, etc. That's one part, really the inclusivity. If we're able to do that, it's good. And secondly, are we able to really credibly weave our activities into the local context? Is it really then the local mediator, if that was also part of the objective, that is part of a solution, and not as an outsider, not as, again, a niche isolated somewhere, but is this really part of the local infrastructure? Are we reaching into these local communities? That is another very important, I think, success factor we can look at. Others, I know that there is a panel dedicated to that later today. We're really looking forward to hear about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Peter. These were very fitting closing words, I think, for this panel. We'll have to slowly wrap it up. Thanks so much to all the panelists for this tour d'horizon, if you want, of the field of mediation. We looked at so many challenges and possible avenues how to develop this further. I think with this, we can now move to one conflict that is very much on everybody's mind these days. This is the conflict in the Middle East. We've spoken about a changing geopolitical landscape, about trust, and about relative successes, and all this, of course, comes together as in a focal point in the Middle East. We are very pleased and honored to have this morning with us the EU Special Representative for the Middle East peace process,
Thank you very much.
Mr. Sven Koopmans. And he has been indeed tasked by EU member states to provide a very active contribution to the final settlement of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict based on a two-state solution. And Sven was previously a member of parliament in the Netherlands, serving also as a spokesperson for foreign affairs. And Sven really has a very long experience on mediation for many different organizations, the European Union, but also the United Nations, the African Union. Without further ado, Sven, we're very curious to hear how your efforts on the Middle East peace process